Welcome once again to our certified Christian mediator training. This is module 8 of the training, and we'll be talking about mediation in family and marriage disputes. I'm Reverend Dr. Temilolu Aliu, and this is the College of Christian Professionals and Researchers, a college of Spirit Brood Theological Seminary. In this module, we will teach you how to handle sensitive family and marital issues through Christian mediation. We will also examine how to balance legal considerations and compassionate resolutions in family and marriage disputes. Then we will talk about how to promote biblical family values and foster restoration. To start with, we need to understand the family institution as established by God. Now, the family system is the first system or institution that God established on the earth. After God made man, He created the heavens and the earth, He made man, then He gave him a wife. And that was the beginning of the family system. So it is the most ancient system that exists on the earth. Meanwhile, it is also the most basic institution on the earth because it forms the basic unit of the society. Meanwhile, it is also the most resilient. There is no institution that has endured like the institution of marriage and like the family institution. Everywhere you go to, you find families there. As much as people divorce every day and people talk about how marriage is this and that, people also get married every day. It's a very 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 resilient system. For instance, some places will say they don't like military governance, they introduce democracy. Some say they don't like democratic rule, they bring in uh, communism or whatever it is. But the family system has endured. There has been no alternative to the family system as established by God that can fill the role of the family as God intended for it to be done. So Genesis chapter 2 from verse 23 to 24, when God brought the woman to Adam, says he said, Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." So, according to God's construct for the family, it is a man and a woman coming together to become one unit, to become, a family. And then they build a family from there, have children, and that now forms a domestic family unit. That is the family system as God established it. Now, the bitter truth is that all marriages and families have issues. There is no perfect marriage anywhere, there is no perfect family anywhere. No perfect marriage anywhere, no perfect family anywhere. All marriages, conflicts are common to all marriages. There is no marriage where there will be no conflict because you are bringing two different people, that have different personalities, that have grown up differently and all of that. And in this 21st century, you even can bring in, cultural diversity. You find somebody, from one race marrying another person from another race. So they are coming from two different worldviews and cultures, and they have come, to form a family unit. So conflicts are bound to happen in every marriage and in every family. Now, if conflicts are not resolved well enough, they become long-term dysfunctions. They become long-term dysfunctions. So it is possible, for instance, for husband and wife to have issues from time to time. That is marital conflict, and it is normal. But when it now comes to a point where husband and wife are inside the house, they don't relate with each other, they just live like roommates or like housemates or flatmates, that has become a dysfunction. So family conflicts or marital conflicts, if not resolved on time, will cause dysfunctions. Meanwhile, whether you are dealing with marital conflict, marital dysfunction, family conflicts, family dysfunction, mediation can still fix the situation. And Christian mediation, in this sense, can only apply to Christian marriages. All kinds of marriages can go for mediation, secular mediators can help. But if you want to mediate from the Christian worldview, if you want to mediate using Christian values, then the people who are coming for mediation must be people who themselves submit to biblical values, who themselves are willing to honor God with their lives, are willing to conform to God's ideals for the family and for marriage, because like we said, Christian mediation is value based. So you are trying, to bring people to the point where they embrace biblical values, where they embrace God's ideal, for their lives, in this case for the family system, in this case, for marriages. So that your mediation can only apply to believers. Now, what are the primary causes of family conflicts? When people come to you, you know they are facing a situation, they need the mediator to help, they need somebody to step in as a neutral third party to work towards a resolution. The primary fundamental cause of whatever conflict they have brought to you rather, will be one or more of these things that you see on your screen. Number one is sin. Because of the sinful nature of man, every human is flawed. Every human being, even the best of men, is still a man at the end of the day. Every human is flawed. So sometimes it's just the effect of sin. So you see some character deficits, you see some personality issues, and all of that. So the effect of sin is one of the primary causes of family conflict. Ego is another primary cause, because sometimes things don't need to escalate except ego gets in the way. So, and as a mediator, you must be trained to understand. So, for instance, people have come to you, they are discussing the different issues that they are facing, in the family or in their marriage. You must begin to piece things together. Well, this is just the effect of saying, okay, I see ego, at play here. Another one is individual differences. Because I found out that in many cases of conflict, it is very possible that none of them is wrong. Now, that's a funny thing. Two people have disagreed on a matter, but neither of them is wrong. They are both right. The only issue is that they are different. So, what they are dealing with is not, right versus wrong. It's just differences, you know. So, individual differences and sometimes you will need to help them come to understand, look, you are two different individuals. So, for instance, let's take one source of individual difference: temperament. So you find someone who is choleric, and you find someone who is maybe phlegmatic, or you find someone who is sanguine, and you find someone who is melancholy. So sanguine is always, always wants to be out there, always wants people around, and then the melancholy likes a private life. So this is a sanguine that has married a melancholy, and every day he brings friends to the house. And then the wife, being a melancholy, just wants to, be by herself. She doesn't even mind, you can bring your friends, but allow me to stay inside. And then the man says, you are not hospitable. At the end of the day, neither of them is wrong. What they are dealing with is individual difference. So they now need to find a way, to meet in the middle, to find, a meeting point midway. So individual differences can also be one of the fundamental causes of family conflict. Then different views. Sometimes they are not. It's not just about being different from the other person, but holding a different view from the other person. And I've discovered that many times two people don't need, to agree for them to be agreeable. Again, two people do not need to agree for them to be agreeable. I can hold a different view from you, but because I honor you, I respect you, and because I value our relationship, I choose to be agreeable with you despite what we do not agree on. And it is one of the things we see in the body of Christ. Because fundamentally, what makes a person a Christian is that you believe in the finished work of Christ, and you have put your faith in Jesus, and you believe there is no other way to salvation, and no other way to God apart from Jesus Christ. But beyond that, we will have, different views on specific doctrines. But at the end of the day, we are still brothers in Christ. And though we may disagree on those doctrines, we can still choose to be agreeable. And that applies in family and marriage issues too. That two people can hold different views and still choose to be agreeable. So sometimes when people have come to you and they are discussing their issues, you may be able to, identify that, well, I think this is a matter of different views. Sometimes one person will need to drop their view for the other. Other times they will just choose to be agreeable. Other times both of them will need to drop their views and, settle for something midway between the two of them. And then clash of interests. One wants this, the other wants that. You see this a lot in parenting. Clash of interests. So again, these five things are the fundamental, the primary causes of family conflicts. There are other secondary causes of family conflicts, but they all trace back to the five things we mentioned: sin, ego, individual differences, different views. These are the fundamental, things that can cause marital or family conflicts. But secondary issues, you can talk of miscommunication. Somebody said something that they didn't say the right way, or they were not able to pass their message across the right way. Misconceptions, we trust issues many times lead to misconceptions, because you have concluded in your heart that this is the kind of person that this person is. Everything they do, you interpret it like that. This is another cause. But like I said again, these are secondary issues. Many times you trace the primary issue to the first five things that we mentioned. So you talk of neglect, when someone feels that their needs are not met, where they feel they are not getting enough attention, where they feel that they are being taken for granted and all of that. Power struggles, when maybe within a family someone is struggling, two people are in a whether cold war or real war for power and authority. Who is in charge here? Sometimes it's between husband and wife, sometimes it's between siblings, sometimes it's even between parent and children, especially adolescents. Power struggles, financial issues too. Financial issues can cause family or marriage issues. He's not making enough money available. She's not putting her money on the table. I need money. My parents are not giving me. It gives the child too much money. All of these things. Financial issues. Is getting into debt. She gambles. Financial issues can cause conflicts. Infidelity. That's a major, major, major issue. Infidelity or marital unfaithfulness. In-law conflicts, when there are third parties. Sometimes it's not even in-laws. It is friends. I like to say that there are father-in-laws, mother-in-laws, brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, then there are friend-in-laws. In-law conflicts can, cause family disputes to substance abuse, someone who drinks a lot, someone who smokes, someone who is into drugs and all of that. Elder care, especially between siblings, children of, senior citizens. How do we care for our parents? How do we take care of our elderly parent? This can also cause issues. It can cause issues in marriage too. Husband and wife, maybe one of them says, well, my dad is old or my mom is old, she needs someone to take care of her, I need someone to take care of him, I want him to come stay with us, and the other person disagrees. These are some things that can cause issues in families and marriages. Inheritance issues too, when someone dies and has left properties or whatever, and then the children are fighting for inheritance. These can cause family or marriage issues. Parenting, I referred to that earlier. And then divorce or disowning. Now, between parents and children, there can be disowning. Between husband and wife, there can be divorce. And this can cause issues where one person wants divorce or where one person wants to disown. These are common secondary causes, family conflicts. It is important for you to, to know these things so that you can identify it when you see them, so that at least you have something basic to work with when people sit before you, so that you have a background, let's say, list with which you are trying to evaluate the things you are hearing. It's like you are running the information they are giving you through your own database to find out, okay, what is the root of the problem here? Why are these people in this situation? Why is there a dispute? Why is there a conflict? These are some of the issues that you will come across, and you must be equipped as a mediator to help people walk through these situations towards resolution. Now, if people have started facing issues in their family or in their marriage, it can always take in fact, the natural progression is to go through the downward spiral. Like the domino effect. Something falls and then pushes the other, and things just begin to fall apart from there on. Now, every family conflict or issue starts with either disagreement or displeasure. Is either I disagree with you or I'm not pleased with what you have done. You see, that is basic, simple. I don't like what you have done, or I don't agree with you. And at that state, things can easily be fixed. But if they are not fixed at that level, then it leads to disaffection. Disaffection is, I don't like you. I'm not pleased with you. You have an issue. By the time disaffection comes in, then you begin to hear things like, you always do this. That is disaffection. You are now beginning to form opinions about the other person that will now begin to inform your disposition to them, in the future. That will then begin to affect how you resolve future conflicts. And disaffection is in grades. There are minor disaffections, like some of the ones I've mentioned, but there are major issues where you just decide to set that person aside or to put that person away. And that is actually what the Bible refers to as divorce. It says putting away. When Bible says God hates divorce, if you read some translations, it will tell you God hates putting away. So when you just put the person away, that is disaffection. And then from disaffection, it progresses to become resentment, where you hate the person, loathe the person. There are family members that don't see eye to eye. They resent each other. They don't even want to have anything to do with each other. And if that is not fixed, it may lead to aggression, where either physical aggression, verbal aggression, emotional aggression, where somebody is actively working against the interest of the other person or trying to hurt the other person in one way or the other, and then finally leads to separation. So this is the negative progression that can occur. Now, as a mediator, when people come to you, they have a family issue, they have a marital issue, one of the things you must do is to stage their conflict. In other words, what stage has this conflict got into? What stage has this, dispute got into? Are we just dealing with disagreement or displeasure? Or now we are dealing with disaffection? Or we are dealing with resentment? Or there's some form of aggression here? Or we are dealing with imminent separation? You must be able to stage, because understanding what stage they are in will help you know how to work them back up to the place of peace, to the place of harmony, and to the place of unity. Now, the outlook is another thing you need to diagnose when people come to you for mediation. So you diagnose first what is the uh, primary cause that we are looking at. Are there secondary causes that we are dealing with here? What stage has this conflict got into? Then what outlook do these people have? Number one outlook that you will see in some family dispute cases is the you or me mindset. The you or me mindset says all or none. There must be one winner, one loser. So the you or me mindset is where people are fighting for their own individual interests and they don't care about the other person. Some people are at that point. Then there is the you and me mindset. Some people may have that you and me mindset of give and take. See, I don't want to have too much issues with you. I don't want too much drama. Just let's do give and take. Win some, lose some. I'm ready to compromise if you are ready to compromise. That is the you and me mindset. And then there is the we mindset. That is the mindset of unity. The we mindset says, let love lead. What we are looking for is a win-win situation. It's not even about win some, lose some. We want to be able to go into the future knowing that both of us are fully satisfied with the outcome and we are fully at peace with each other. See, as a Christian mediator, you see, sometimes the problem in mediation is that mediators promote the you and me mindset. Win some, lose some. But in Christian mediation is the we mindset. We must start, because at the end of the day, if we are all living by the same values, we should be able to come to the same conclusion. Such that even if we have to lay aside some of our interests, it is still a win-win situation, because we are conforming, to the values of Christ. We are conforming to scriptural values, and we are happy that we are doing so as believers. We know that it is now a journey of growth for us. We have become better through this. So as a Christian mediator, you should always promote the we mindset. Let love lead. So that we are looking at, a win-win situation at the end of the day. Now, courts sometimes, when people take family issues or marital issues to the court. Even the court will tell them, go for mediation, then come back if you cannot resolve it, because the court recognizes the peculiarity of the family system. These are relationships that you cannot change, especially uh, when it's relation by blood. There is nothing like ex brother, there is nothing like ex sister. Your sister is always your sister, your brother is always your brother. There's nothing like ex father, there's nothing like ex mother. Your father is always your father, your mother is always your mother. And while there can be ex husband and ex wife, you cannot erase the record of a marriage. Two people may have been friends in the past and they are no longer friends. I mean, everybody moves on. But if it is marriage, it becomes part of your life history forever. If they are writing your biography, they will not write the people you used to be friends with that you are no more friends with. But if you will write your biography, if you have married and divorced, it will be part of your history. It will be part of your life story. Go to Wikipedia, check the stories of different people, check their biography. You will see it there. Ex-wife, they will write it there. But you will hardly find a column for ex-friend. It becomes part of your biodata for life. And that is why we promote mediation above litigation when it comes to family issues. Now, as a mediator, you must understand the values that mediation brings into family and marriage disputes so that it will guide you in the mediation process. For instance, one of the differences between mediation and litigation is that mediation is non-coercive. Mediation is non-coercive, meaning to say you don't force people into mediation. You don't, and you don't force them to agree to anything they are not willing to agree to. So with that understanding, as a Christian mediator, you work your mediation process to reflect that value. Mediation is also consensual. Consensual. One party cannot choose mediation when the other party does not want mediation. Litigation, on the other hand, does not have to be consensual. If one party wants litigation, both parties must submit to that process. And as a Christian mediator, you must understand this and, apply it in your mediation processes. If one person comes to you and says, they want you to mediate on this issue, you must be sure that the other person consents to it and wants to go through that process. Another thing is that mediation saves time. Sometimes the court can take forever. They keep adjourning and adjourning and adjourning and adjourning and adjourning. Sometimes the situation has gone from bad to worse before the court even addresses the issue. But mediation is supposed to save time. So as a Christian mediator, you must not waste time at all. Whatever you need to do, do quickly. Mediation addresses feelings, whereas litigation addresses facts. So as a Christian mediator, I remember we've talked about this in one of the previous modules. You don't just deal with facts, you deal with the feelings of people involved. And as a mediator, you work towards preserving relationships. Litigation does not put that into consideration at all. And finally, in mediation, you reach an agreement, not a judgment that you impose on both parties. The greatest advantage that mediation, gives us is that the parties reach an amicable settlement. They are not forced to obey the orders of a third party whose final verdict may not even be acceptable to the two people in the or to the different parties in the dispute. We have seen situations where the court rules on a matter and nobody is satisfied. But in mediation, the goal is that everybody comes out satisfied, pleased with what the outcome is. Let me give you a case study. The Smith family. The Smith family. Now, this was, a family with 3 children. Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith had 3 children. And by the time they died, they left an estate for their children. And they left a will also. Their will said that the three children must have equal inheritance. That was what the will said. Now, in the estate that they left, they had a family home, they had a vacation cabin, and then they had a plot of land. And when uh, uh, they died, they said all the three children have equal rights to the property, they inherit the properties equally, and they must jointly decide on the use or sale of each property, how they want to use it, and if they don't want to use it, if they want to sell it, how much are they selling it for, they must jointly decide. Now, after the parents died, disagreements began between the three children, and then it escalated to a point where they could not agree on how to use or share or sell the property. So they took one another to court. The judge eventually ruled that all the properties should be sold, and the proceeds should be split equally among the children, and that the court will supervise the sale. Now, none of them had foreseen or desired this outcome because they had personal interest in the properties. They had hoped, to keep some of the family properties intact and to keep it to themselves. Now, if these Smith siblings decided to go for mediation instead of pursuing a court case, they would not come, back with an outcome that none of them was pleased with. Now, look at in this situation, none of them is pleased with the outcome, and they have lost their relationship. But if they had gone, for mediation, for instance, mediation could have resulted in an agreement that allows each of the siblings to retain the rights of use to those properties whenever they want it. So they can have something like shared ownership. They can even divide it among themselves, where one uses the family home, another one uses the cabin, another one uses the land, if they are willing to do that. And in the case that they feel maybe one is more expensive than the other and it will be unfair for one person to hold on to one, so maybe take for instance, someone feels, well, the family home is in a rural area and the land is in an urban area that is very expensive, and it will be unfair for one person to hold the family home and another person holds the expensive land that they can sell or whatever. They can also, go for a buyout option where one sibling purchases the other people's share in a specific property if they want to retain it. You see, these are some of the things. They could even, plan something like family legacy, where there's a legacy plan on how to preserve the properties for future generations. Meanwhile, such agreements may be subject to periodic reviews if they want to change the terms of the agreement. But now they have gone to court, they cannot do that anymore. And neither of them is pleased with the outcome. That is what happens many times in, litigation cases. And that is why we encourage mediation. And as Christian mediators, you must be a crusader for this. People around you must know that that is what you encourage. Mediation above litigation, especially when it comes to, family and marriage issues. Now, there are some peculiar things about family disputes that you must take note of. Number one is that every dispute is as old as the relationship. This is one truth that many mediators overlook. That's why we have said over and over again, you don't deal with facts, you deal with emotions. Because those emotions may have their root in several things that have happened in time past in the course of, interacting with one another as married couples or as siblings or as family members. So the issue that happened may just be the last straw that broke the camel's back. It may be the trigger. Every dispute is as old as a relationship. So you need to find out what emotions are these people facing and why. What are things that maybe happened in the past that this issue triggered? Every dispute is as old as a relationship. Number two is that marriage disputes are more a matter of sentiment than of reason or fact. Don't try to reason or bring fact. Many times you are dealing with sentiments, and that is why what you need to introduce is values. Because the cure for sentiment is not fact, the cure for sentiment is values. The cure for sentiment is not fact, the cure for sentiment is values. Now, family disputes are not about law and facts, but mostly a matter of the feelings of the parties to the dispute. We've talked about that already. And I mentioned to you already that relativity gives an everlasting identity. You cannot change it, it will stay with you for life. So, having established that, the cure for sentiment is not fact, the cure for sentiment is values. What are some of the values that you must learn, know, and introduce in your mediation process? Again, the values you must learn, know, and introduce in your mediation process. Now, as you are mediating, you must be on the lookout for the violation of any of these values that we're about to examine. And once you identify a breach of any of these values from either parties, put the spotlight on it with meekness. Remember, when we talked about preparing for the mediation process, we mentioned that you can start with a short exhortation. Haven't done your pre-mediation consultations, when it is time, to mediate, your exhortation should be centered around the values that you have discovered are being breached. Should center around the values that you have discovered they are violating. Put the spotlight on those values. So, for example, you see the value of male headship in marriage. Male headship in marriage. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 3 makes it clear that the man is the head of the woman. The man is the head of the woman. And in some marriage conflicts or family conflicts, it is because somebody, either the man is not living true to his headship, or the woman is not submitting to the headship of the man. If you find that to be an issue, and sometimes a woman may find it difficult to submit to the headship of a man who has consistently proven that he is not worthy of being submitted to, because maybe he's a tyrant that takes the woman for a ride, and all of those things. So you reestablish that value. Say this is a scriptural value. It doesn't matter what has happened, it doesn't matter what the situation is. Well, the man remains the head of the home. Now, mutual love is another biblical family value. Mutual love. When you read Colossians chapter 3 verse 19, the Bible makes it clear. Paul said, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. So when you see a case where the man seems not to, love the wife, or has some form of bitterness against her and all of that, you must introduce this value and tell them, look, this is what the Bible says. And it does not matter what has happened in your marriage. Well, you need to love your wife. It's a commitment that between you and the Lord. Titus chapter 2 and verse 4, that you teach young women to be sober, to love their husbands, and to love their children. So there must be mutual love in the family, between husband and wife, between parents and children. When you see that there's some form of disaffection, then you must introduce this value system to them. In Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 21, the Bible says, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So there is the value of mutual submission. It's one of the family values that the Bible promotes. Mutual submission. Submit yourselves one to another. Submit yourselves one to another. Meaning to say, identify the strengths of your partner and submit to them in that area of strength. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 verse 3, when Paul was talking to the Corinthian church, he told them, he said, the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. So the family at the end of the day is under God's headship. So as much as you talk about male headship, you must also explain that the man must also put himself under the authority of God if he will be safe to submit to God's headship. So where you find a man that is, violating the principles of God, behaving anyhow he likes, and he keeps saying, I'm the man, you need to introduce him to this value. And when you find people who keep repeating, I'm the man, and they want to, use it to ride the woman and whatever, You must introduce the value of equality and understanding. First Peter chapter 3 verse 7. Likewise, husbands, dwell with your wives according to knowledge, giving honor to them as unto the weaker vessel. Meaning to say, understand them. And as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. You must treat your wife as an equal partner in the marriage. So male leadership is the place of responsibility. And God expects that you treat your wife as an equal heir. Otherwise, your prayers may be hindered. You see, you introduce these values to them to shape their worldview. Hebrews 13:4. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. So where you see that there is maybe infidelity, or someone is looking outside and all of that, introduce marital fidelity. Put the spotlight on it so that they can make necessary adjustments. First Timothy chapter 5 verse 3. If a man does not provide for his family, he is worse than an infidel. There is another scriptural value to promote. Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he grows, he will not depart from it. Second Timothy chapter 1 and verse 5. Paul was talking about Timothy. He said, when I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in you, which was first in your grandmother and your mother, and persuaded is in you also. So there's some sort of spiritual legacy. This is another value that the Bible talks about, where there are legacies that you hand over to your children, legacies of faith, of spirituality, and all sorts of things. The things that you learned late, you want to teach your children early. The things that made you who you have become, you want to make sure that you bequeath it to your children. Especially, spiritual standards. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 2. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. So that's another biblical value. Encouraging children to honor their parents no matter what. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 30. Children, obey your parents in all things. Colossians 3:20 rather. Children, obey your parents in all things. And in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. This is another scriptural value that you must introduce, to people in the mediation process. And don't forget to also teach them Colossians chapter 3 verse 21, where Bible says that fathers should not provoke their children to anger, lest they be discouraged from obeying. So parents should not provoke their children. These are biblical family values that you must master as a Christian mediator. I need you to go back to that list, review it over and over and over again, so that it becomes part of you. And so that when people are talking, you can diagnose immediately what biblical value is being violated, and then put the spotlight on it so that you bring them to that. So sometimes when you have a dispute, there may be 5 members of the family that are violating different biblical values. The father is provoking the child to anger. The child is not obedient. The mother is supporting the child against the father, not recognizing the headship of the man. And because of that, the man also has begun to, treat the wife badly and trying to impose on her as the man of the house. So you now need to look at everything and begin to introduce values. It's like a complex knot that you are trying to untie one after the other by introducing values. So the value of male headship, the value of mutual love, the value of mutual submission, the value of God's headship, the value of equality and understanding, the value of marital fidelity, the value of provision for the family, training up a child, spiritual legacy, honoring parents, obedience to parents, and not provoking parents to anger. Someone may ask, what's the difference between honoring parents and obeying parents? Honor is a disposition of the heart, because you can obey without honor. Meanwhile, you can disagree without dishonoring, especially for adult children. Because when you become an adult and you have a family, your parents cannot continue to control you. A man will leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife. So in such cases, you are permitted to disagree, but you are not permitted to dishonor. So these are biblical family values, that we must introduce in our mediation process. Beyond these family values, there are communal values that the Bible encourages us as believers. And you will see these communal values in scriptures that use the phrase one another, meaning to say, wherever there is a community of believers that have gathered together, then we must all obey these communal values. If you find a group of Christians working in the same office, they must be subject to these communal values. You find people in a church, this is a group of believers, they must submit to these communal values. There is a Christian family, every member of the family must submit to these communal values. There are 15 of them. Number one, love one another. Love one another. We must relate with one another in the true spirit of love. Jesus himself said in John 13 from verse 34, he says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. He says in the next verse, by this you will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So we ought to love one another, and this is one communal value that you must promote as a Christian mediator. In Galatians chapter 5 verse 13, Paul said, you have been called to liberty, only use not the liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. So in a Christian family, everybody must be willing to be of service to one another, to serve, not to lord it over anyone, but to serve one another in the fear of God. Galatians chapter 6 verse 2, bear one another's burdens. Bear one another's burdens. So it is all for one, one for all. It's one of the communal values of the scripture. And for those who are pastors that are taking this course, your church must learn these communal values. Teach them to your workers in church. Every father must teach this to their family. If you have adult children, sit them down and teach them these values. These are the values that every Christian community, including the church, including families, must submit to. Bear one another's burdens. If something is wrong with one person, it becomes everybody's concern. Colossians chapter 3 verse 13, we see another communal value there. For bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also you must do. So it's one of the values that the scriptures, recommend for every Christian community. Forbear with one another, endure one another's excesses, forgive one another. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 32, we see another communal value there. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 32, be kind to one another, be tender-hearted towards one another. Even if you need to correct, do it kindly. Even if you disagree on anything, be kind about how you communicate your disagreement. If you are displeased about anything, be kind in your approach. Be kind to one another. Colossians chapter 3 verse 16 says, teach and admonish one another. Teach and admonish one another. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 13, encourage one another. Encourage one another. James chapter 5 verse 16, confess your faults to one another. Don't keep secrets from one another. Every family must have a structure, a system where everyone can be open and talk about their mistakes, with their family members. Confess to one another. And in the same James chapter 5 verse 16, it says, pray for one another. So you must consistently pray with and pray for one another. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 2, we see another scriptural value there. Forbear, it says, with all lowliness and meekness, with long suffering, forbear one another in love. Verse 3 says, making efforts to keep the unity of the spirit in the bond of peace. Put up with one another, forbear one another, with meekness, with long suffering. Forbear. Endure their excesses. Give them enough room to change. Keep believing for the best. Don't give up on one another. Come what may. These are biblical communal values that we must submit to. and that as a Christian mediator, you must promote in your mediation process. Put the spotlight on these values whenever you notice they have been violated by one or more parties in the mediation. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 11. Build up one another. Build up one another. Help one another to become better. Edify one another. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 verse 18. Comfort one another. Comfort one another. If anybody is going through anything, bring comfort to them. And make sure you are not the reason why anyone in the family is facing discomfort or is not comfortable. Comfort one another. James chapter 4 verse 11. James chapter 4 verse 11. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. Don't grumble against one another. Don't speak evil of one another. If you have anything against any member of your family, go to meet them and talk to them. Don't gossip about one another. Don't complain to others about your spouse. You see, these are biblical communal values. Don't drag your spouse on the ground before people outside. Don't paint your children black or paint your parents black to people outside. If you have any issue, discusses amongst one another. And in the case where you need to get a mediator or you need sound counsel, know who to talk to. You see, these are biblical values that as a Christian mediator, you must promote in your mediation in family and marriage issues. Be of the same mind. Romans chapter 12 verse 16. And Hebrews 10:24, look for ways, to provoke one another unto love and good works. Challenge one another to become more loving. Challenge one another to do good, to do well, to treat people well. These are biblical values. Again, there are 15 of them. And you see, you need to review this over and over again until they become a part of you. So that you as a Christian mediator, you are living this life and it becomes easy for you to encourage others to live the same life. So it is not theory. This is what you do as a person. Love one another, serve one another, bear one another's burdens, forgive one another, be kind to one another, teach and admonish one another, encourage one another, comfort one another, pray for one another, confess your faults to one another, put up with one another, build up one another, don't grumble against one another, be of the same mind with one another, and challenge one another unto love and good works. Now, there are special cases that may take a different approach from, handling things through these value systems. One of them is the case of domestic violence. This kind of approach that we have talked about so far, where you introduce values, you diagnose the stage and all of this, what's the root cause, what stage are they in, what is the mindset or outlook they are bringing into mediation, what are the value systems that are being violated, family values, communal values, and then putting the spotlight on them. You see, these kind of approach works in every other case, but there are cases where it may not work. One of them is in case of domestic violence. When there is domestic violence, you must involve appropriate professionals. You must involve appropriate professionals. Sometimes that will include the police, sometimes welfare officers. Sometimes you may need to, involve counselors. But in the case of mediation, please involve professionals. Involve professionals and follow established protocols and legal frameworks. Follow established protocols and legal frameworks. Not just, we are going to do value-based mediation. That sometimes does not work in domestic violence cases. And you may wonder, why is it so? Number one, safety concerns. if you are just trying to do, values and all of that, the person who, is abusing the other may not stop overnight. And you need to be bothered about the safety of the other person, so that you don't hear one day that somebody has killed the other. Power imbalance is another case, because many times when there is a case of domestic abuse, there is a serious power imbalance, serious one. And then manipulation, because as sad as this may be, some abusers use mediation to manipulate their victim to stay, because they know that they will get away whatever they have done, because they know, well, if we go for mediation, they will just, I know the things they will tell me and all of that and all of that. So they use that, as a platform to manipulate and intimidate the victim. They can even use mediation to manipulate their victim to drop charges in the case of someone who has already gone to court. And sometimes following this general approach of mediation can re-victimize the person, because you can force them into situations where they have to interact with the abuser, which can be emotionally traumatic, and where they may be subject to further abuse and also legal liabilities. You must be careful, so that at the end of the day, you will not be guilty of aiding and abetting. So that you will not be guilty. So these are the reasons why the traditional approach that we have discussed, for general family and marriage disputes may not work in cases of domestic violence. Now, what is the domestic violence process in mediation? Number one is you must immediately establish the protection of the one who is being abused. That is the first thing you must do. Protect them. Protect them. You may get restraining orders, sometimes even prosecution orders, but you can just start with restraining orders to start with. You must protect the one who is being abused from further abuse. Number two, support services. So the victim of domestic violence may need some kinds of support, like counseling, and in some cases legal advocacy. Then in cases where this is necessary, you can recommend separation, but it must not end there. Beyond separation, then there must be intervention where the abuser submits themselves to a process that will help them get better. Maybe counseling, anger management course, or something that the perpetrator is mandated to go through, or a system of discipline. And when the intervention is complete, then that is when they can now come back for mediation. But in cases where that fails, then by all means, allow them to go for prosecution. So again, the process is first establish the protection of the one who is being abused, get them the necessary support that they need, separate them from the abuser, then introduce a system of intervention to help the perpetrator get better. And from there on, you can now move into the traditional mediation process towards reconciliation and resolution. And where that fails, allow them, to go for litigation, or allow the abuser to be prosecuted. Another special case where traditional mediation may not work is in cases where the parties have agreed to part ways and they desire to do so amicably. So they are coming to you not to resolve the problem, they are coming to you to help them part amicably. And some others are in situations where separation is inevitable, like we talked about domestic violence, where you as the mediator may even need to recommend separation while they go through intervention and all of that. In cases like that, traditional mediation will not work, so you must set it aside in such cases. Now, what should you do when two parties desire to part ways? Number one, identify the main causes of the dispute. Once you have identified the main causes, primary cause, secondary cause, identify what is going on, explore the possibility of reconciliation. You can ask them, are you still willing to give this a try? Do you want us to try to fix this? Explore the possibility of reconciliation. Encourage separation instead of divorce, because in some cases, if they are made up their minds to part ways, tell them you can explore separation first instead of outrightly going for divorce. And while they are separated, refer them for counseling or recommend necessary intervention. Like in the case of domestic violence, then you can recommend therapy, anger management course, counseling, or whatever. But refer them, and then chart the course while the separation subsists. Because while they are separated and they are trying to work on the situation and to see the possibility of eventual resolution, there must be a course. There must be how things will run while they are separated. And as a mediator, you must get this done too. Don't just refer them for counseling and then you leave them. Some of these issues, if you don't deal with them, they will further cause quarrels or cause issues between them that will even make it more difficult for them to resolve whatever issues they had. One of them is property management. If they jointly own a property, how will they manage the property while they are separated? In some countries, if there's separation, the man must leave, the woman retains the house. In some other countries, there are no such rules. So again, you must get involved in that. Child custody and visitation. Who will the children stay with? And while the children are staying with this person, how often can the other person visit? What is the visitation arrangement? In a public place, in the house, you take the children to them, or they come over. Are the children going to spend weekends with the other person, or one day in the park with the other person, or the other person is allowed to visit one day of the week? Except in cases of violence, domestic violence. As a mediator, encourage a system where the visitation will allow both parties to interact. Then you talk about child support and alimony. So while the child is staying, for example, say with the children, stay with the mother, how will they be catered for? How much is the father expected to bring, say, each week, each month, for the upkeep of the children? And in some countries, there are laws on alimony too. If you are still married to the person, if you are separated and you are not staying together, there is an amount you must give them for their upkeep. You discuss these things and help them resolve it. Financial matters, if they are servicing a debt together, how will that be done? you know so these are some of the things. You can talk of financing, maybe health insurance that they did for the entire family. So you need to resolve all of these issues, and then other issues that they raise that seem to be important to them. Meanwhile, these are all supposed to be temporary issues. Remember that separation should not be the end of the game. And on other issues, you must not even go near this issue of separation. But in special cases like the case of domestic violence, or in a case where both parties are even ready to divorce, they want to divorce, both parties don't want to stay with each other, they just want amicable settlement. As a Christian mediator, encourage separation first, deal with these issues, then get some form of intervention while they are separated. Now, special case number 3 is when a mediator is required to witness in court about a case. As a Christian mediator, if you are called to witness in court about a case, please note that you are not under any form of obligation to reveal to the court the specifics of what transpired during the mediation. This person said this, that person said this. Remember, as a mediator, it's not about guilt and innocence. So you are not going to court to let the court know who is saying the truth and who is lying. You are not under any obligation to reveal the specifics of what transpired during your mediation processes. The only thing you are required to do is to submit a report stating the agreements reached through the mediation process. Nothing more than that. And sometimes maybe a copy of the agreement signed by the parties. That's the only thing you need to do to give that to the court and to defend it that, well, I was the one who mediated, this was the agreement we reached, my signature is there, their signatures are there, full stop. You are not permitted to be a witness on the facts of the issue, not at all. You are only permitted to present the mediation agreement to the court and to defend the fact that you know about it, you are the witness to it, and that is all. So in cases where matters eventually degenerate to become a court case, you are not permitted to side with any party or to give any form of witness or tell any stories. Remember confidentiality. Whatever they told you in that mediation process stays with you, and you must let them know that. And that is why, as a Christian mediator, you need to learn how to draft agreements. In one of the later lectures in this course, we are going to talk about how to draft mediation agreements that will be recognized by the court. Because, in all honesty, in many cases, you must draft an official agreement. There are cases where you just go with a gentleman's agreement, but cases that involve very serious issues like money issues, inheritance issues, things like that. For example, special family issues of domestic violence that you have referred, or issues of agreements on how to proceed during a separation, you must draft an agreement that both parties must sign. Remember that anything you don't draft and sign an agreement on, where both parties do not sign and you sign as the mediator, is not legally binding on them. You just have to trust them that they will do well and they will abide by the agreements that have been reached. But in some cases, you would need to draft an agreement so that they are committed to keeping to the resolutions that were reached through the mediation process. And with that, we have come to the end of this module. Thank you very much for listening. Our contact details are on your screen. You can reach out to us if you have any questions or inquiries. And I want to hear from you. I want to know, what is your name, where you have listened from, what have you learned from this module, how are you going to apply it in your practice as a Christian mediator. God bless you till the next module when we meet again. Shalom.